Welcome to the deep dive. So you sent us this breakdown of James chapter 4, and that's exactly what we're going to get into today.
Great. Yeah. This chapter, it really packs a punch.
It does. The source material we looked at frames it around this theme. Submit to God, resist the devil, and come back to grace.
Mm-hmm. Which feels very much like a wake-up call, doesn't it?
Totally. It goes right after things like pride, conflict, spiritual compromise,
Mm-hmm.
even just plain selfish ambition.
All the tough stuff.
Yeah. So our goal here is really just to unpack the core insights verse by verse and see how they might actually apply in your life day to day.
Sounds good. Where do you start?
Okay, let's jump right in. Verses 1 through 3. It starts with that very direct question. What causes fights and quarrels among you?
And what's immediately striking, I think, is James's answer. He doesn't point fingers outward.
Right, not at circumstances or other people initially.
Exactly. He points inward. He says the real root, the source of all this conflict, it's the desires that battle within you.
Which is a real shift in perspective, isn't it?
Yeah. It absolutely is. I mean, think about how often we react to conflict. Our instinct is usually to look for the external cause, right?
Yeah, who did what wrong out there?
But James just flips that. He challenges us, saying, hang on, what's going on inside your own heart? What desires, what jealousies, what ambitions are fueling this?
It forces some serious self-reflection. Are my demands, my way of wanting things, actually creating the friction?
That's the core of it. Our source material really emphasized that tendency to blame others. But James pushes for that deeper look. What's really driving the bitterness or the envy?
It can be uncomfortable territory.
Oh, definitely. But probably necessary if we want to understand what's actually happening in our disagreements.
Which brings us to that really pointed question the source pulls out for reflection. Where in my life am I demanding my way instead of surrendering?
Oof. Yeah, that's a stopper.
It really is. Makes you think about those specific areas where maybe you're gripping the controls a bit too tightly.
Right. Holding on to your own agenda, maybe even hurting relationships or your own peace of mind in the process. It's those subtle ways we insist on things, isn't it?
Okay, so moving on then. Verses 4 and 5, this is where the language gets, well, pretty intense.
Yeah, he hits hard with, you adulterous people.
Okay. Wow. Let's unpack that. What's going on there?
Well, it's important to see it as a metaphor, like the source suggests. It's not primarily about literal marital infidelity.
Right.
It's about spiritual unfaithfulness. James is using this really strong image to talk about chasing after worldly things, approval, pleasure, status, the world's way of doing things, instead of prioritizing our connection with God.
So it's like the Old Testament prophets talking about Israel chasing other gods, that kind of imagery.
Exactly like that. Seeking validation or fulfillment from the world, from temporary things, becomes a kind of spiritual betrayal.
That's heavy. It really makes you consider where you're placing your ultimate loyalty or sense of worth.
It does, and James is basically saying you can't have it both ways. Divided loyalty doesn't work.
Like the source put it, you can't hold hands with God and flirt with the world.
Precisely. Trying to keep a foot firmly in both camps, well, it just leads to this spiritual emptiness, this disconnect.
Which leads to those challenging, reflective questions again, doesn't it? Like, am I compromising my values just to fit in or stay comfortable or be accepted?
Mm-hmm. And fundamentally, who really has my heart, God or the world?
Those cut deep. They force you to really examine where your trust and affection are actually directed.
Yeah, it's about an honest look at how we spend our energy, our time, what we're really living for. Who are we trying to please, ultimately?
But then right after that intensity, we get to verse 6,
Mm-hmm.
and it feels like, well, like a breath of fresh air almost.
Yes, but he gives us more grace.
That's such a crucial turn, isn't it? After pointing out our struggles, our tendency to get pulled off course.
Right, there's this incredible reminder of God's abundant grace. It's this message of hope, that failure isn't the final word. We aren't stuck.
But there's a condition attached, or maybe a posture required. The verse goes on to quote scripture.
Yes. God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble.
So grace isn't automatic if we're kind of stuck in our own pride.
Exactly. It's not a license to just keep doing our own thing. Grace flows towards humility. Pride, that sense of, I've got this, I don't need help, actually creates a barrier.
Like the source said, pride builds walls.
Right. Humility opens doors. God actively resists the proud, the self-sufficient, but he rushes towards the humble with favor and help.
So moving from pride to humility, what does that actually look like, do you think?
Well, I think it's a fundamental shift, isn't it? From trying to manage and control everything ourselves
Hmm.
to acknowledging our limits, our need for something, for someone beyond our own strength.
Which ties right into that reflective question of have I been trying to fix life with pride or surrendering with humility? It
Mhm.
really frames it as an act of choice.
It really does.
Yeah.
Self-reliance versus dependence on God. That's the core choice.
Okay. This leads us nicely into the next section,
Yeah.
verses 7 through 10. This feels very practical, like a roadmap.
Yeah, it reads like a step-by-step guide to getting back on track spiritually. It starts very clearly. Submit yourselves then to God.
So that's the first step. A conscious decision to yield, to let go of our own way.
To recognize his authority, his guidance, and then immediately after.
Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. It's interesting that resisting the negative comes after submitting to God.
I think that's key. It suggests our power to resist doesn't just come from gritting our teeth.
Hmm.
It's rooted in that prior act of submission.
So aligning with God gives us the strength to stand against those destructive influences or lies.
That's how I read it. Our strength comes from that alignment. And then comes that beautiful promise.
Come near to God, and he will come near to you.
Yeah, it emphasizes the relationship. It's reciprocal. Our movement towards God is met by his movement towards us.
It's not just us trying harder on our own.
No, definitely not. And then the next steps get even more active, don't they?
Right. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. This seems to link our actions and our inner state.
Absolutely. It's about stopping the wrong outward behaviors, cleansing your hands, and dealing with the inner turmoil, the divided loyalties, purifying your hearts.
That phrase, double-minded,
Hmm.
what does that capture for you?
It feels like that state of being pulled in two directions, right? Trying to hold on to God and the world, like we talked about, it paralyzes real commitment.
So true change needs both outward action and inward purification.
A holistic approach. And then the call to grieve and mourn. That sounds intense.
It does. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom. It sounds like taking sin, taking our failures really seriously.
Not just brushing it off. It's about having a genuine sorrow, an appropriate emotional and spiritual response to the ways we've missed the mark, rather than just a shallow oops.
Acknowledging the weight of it.
Exactly. And then this whole pathway culminates, circles back, really, to humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up.
Back to humility is the key.
Yes. And the source had that great image. This whole process isn't about wallowing in shame. It's an invitation to come back through an open door, but you have to stoop, you have to come low to get through it.
That's a powerful picture. And the reflection questions here are quite searching too. Where have I resisted God instead of the devil?
Ooh, yeah, that flips it, doesn't it?
And what do I need to lay down? What control to draw near again? These demand specifics.
They really do. They push us beyond abstract ideas to pinpoint the actual roadblocks in our own lives. What are we holding on to that keeps us distant?
Okay, then verses 11 and 12 shift the focus a bit, outward towards how we treat each other.
Yes, with that very direct command. Brothers and sisters, do not slander one another.
This feels like a really practical outflow of the humility we've just been talking about.
I think so too. James is basically saying, look, when you tear someone down, when you judge them, you're stepping into God's shoes.
Right. The verse says, anyone who speaks against a brother or sister or judges them speaks against the law. There is only one lawgiver and judge.
The one who is able to save and destroy. It's a stark reminder of who's actually in charge. Judging others puts us in a position we have no right to occupy.
So gossip, slander, harsh criticism,
Yeah,
it's like usurping God's role. That's a sobering way to think about it.
it is. And the source rightly reminds us we're all flawed, right?
Yeah.
We all need grace. How can we then turn around and deny that same understanding or mercy to others through our words?
Which makes that reflective question incredibly relevant. Am I tearing people down behind their backs or lifting them up in their absence?
Yeah, that's a daily gut check for our conversations. Are we building up or tearing down?
Definitely something to consider.
Okay.
Okay, verses 13 through 16. Here, James turns to our attitude about the future.
Yes, with that caution to those who say, essentially, we're going to go here, do business for a year, make money.
Planning ahead, making goals.
Right, but James says, hold on. You do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist.
That appears for a little time and then vanishes.
Wow, that really puts things in perspective. It absolutely does. He uses this incredibly vivid image life as a mist, a vapor, to highlight how temporary, how fragile it is.
So making plans without acknowledging God, without acknowledging this transience, is seen as, what, Arrogance.
Exactly. It's presented as prideful boasting. Not because planning itself is wrong. The source was clear on that.
Right, we need a plan.
Of course. But it's the attitude of assuming we have complete control, acting as if the future is entirely in our hands without any reference to God's will or sovereignty. That's the arrogance.
Which is why he suggests saying, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that.
It's a small phrase, if the Lord wills, but it represents a huge shift in posture, doesn't it? A recognition of reality beyond our own blueprints.
And it leads to that question, have I been trying to script my life without the author?
Mm-hmm. Have I been acting like I'm the main character and the writer, forgetting there's a bigger story, a greater author involved?
Holding plans with open hands, essentially.
That's a great way to put it. Responsible planning, but held loosely acknowledging God's ultimate direction.
Okay, and finally, we land on verse 17. This feels like a concluding punchline almost.
It really does. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin.
This broadens the definition of sin significantly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just about committing wrongs.
Right. It's also about omitting good, the sin of inaction, failing to do the good that you know you ought to do.
The source highlighted that idea. Delayed obedience is disobedience.
Yeah, that really struck me too. How often do we know what's right, what we should do, but we hesitate?
We wait for the perfect time or for conditions to be just right, or maybe we just procrastinate.
Exactly, but James cuts through that. If you know it's the right thing, the time to act is now. Awareness brings responsibility.
Which makes that final reflective question so direct. What act of obedience have I been putting off?
It's a call to immediate action, isn't it? Move from knowing to doing.
So bringing this all together, wrapping up our deep dive into James 4, what's the big takeaway?
For me, it's that relentless, pervasive call to humility. It touches everything, our inner world, our relationship with worldly pressures, how we relate to God, how we treat others, how we view the future, even our actions versus inactions.
It really is woven through the whole chapter. It's this constant invocation to look honestly at ourselves and rely more fully on God's grace.
Yeah, and it's not just about thinking differently, it's about doing differently.
Yeah.
Choosing submission over self-will, resisting those negative pulls, actively drawing near to God.
And making sure our actions, and even our lack of action, line up with what we know is true.
Precisely. And thinking about that prayer idea from the source material, it leaves you with this final thought, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Just considering where in your life could benefit from letting go a bit more, from relying less on your own plans and more on a strength beyond yourself.
What would it look like to live day to day really knowing life is like that mist and that